Hello everyone, welcome to your next section. Today we're going to take what we learned from our previous section, which was using requests to go get some HTML source code and then converting it into a beautiful soup object so we can use that set of packages to do our string slicing of an HTML website. We're going to now take that object and do our extraction of it. So we're going to try and figure out ways in order to get down to very specific areas of our HTML text to only extract certain things that we want from it, rather than trying to scrape everything from the top, okay? So in this class, I'm hoping that by the end of this, you're going to be starting to understand how you can formulate how to go to a website, find the tags that you need to extract the data that you want from that web page. And that if you can't find that information on the HTML source code, then you're going to need to do some additional learning on how to build more advanced web scrapers in order to get that. One thing that comes to mind if you are interested in that is learning something called Selenium. Okay, but that is more of an advanced topic. It will take us more than just an extra class to learn that. In this class, we're going to learn how to get, once we have that beautiful soup information, how to extract the HTML source code from it, get the tag, go down to the tags that we need to get the information that we want, and then to how to subsequently store that information in a file somewhere so that we can do later processing or do analysis with it even. But we're just going to store it there so that way we could build a scraper that puts all our information somewhere, and then we do our analytics after the fact. It's usually better to kind of chunk it those ways, okay? So in terms of definitions, we learned about HTML tags from our last class. Remember, they're identifiers labeled by the developer. We looked at that in both sections, actually. I showed you the class and ID in section 1, as well as the class and ID in section 2, and how HTML tagging all actually works. So that should be just a reminder for you guys, okay? Let's just move into syntax now. I'm going to show you the Jupyter Notebook code that we're going to play with and go through it line by line to describe what's going on. I might even pull up a browser at some point as well to show you what's going on with that too. Okay, so let's jump into it. Okay, so a lot of this code should be familiar to you guys. Actually, everything should be familiar up until about this line here, right under soup, okay? So I'm going to remind you of some stuff that we did in the last class. We initialized some packages. There's a new package here. This is a JSON package. Remember what JSON is, guys? JavaScript Object Node. A JSON object is really just a Python dictionary. There is no difference between them. So when we have the input, when we use JSON functions, we can use things to manipulate dictionaries that were kind of already pre-built for JavaScript. And one of them is saving a dictionary onto your local drive in a really easy way to do it. Okay, so that's why we're using that package. So we have a list of websites here under the URL variable. We have just one website in here. So if we looked at the length of this list, or length of this website, or length of this list, it would be length of 1, and it would just have an element position of 0 here. This would be position 0. And we have it go through a for loop. Everything that occurs in this for loop is indented now, okay? So we are going, this is for every website with this one indentation, okay? So if you had hundreds of websites, it's going to run through this process every time. We go to the website, we try and get an HTML response and extract some information. We check to make sure that it returned as 200 status code, meaning that it was a successful request get. We use the .status code thing here because if we just print this R object, it's not an integer, and we can't really use. I mean, you can build some kind of logic for it, but it's much better to build this as logic because it's much more simple and it actually tells you what's going on. We know that this is a successful call from our last class, so we skip this. And then we have our page, which is we take our response object and convert it into a string, into text. We then take that stringified HTML object and pass it through our beautiful soup converter. This beautiful soup function will turn into a beautiful soup will return a beautiful soup object using the HTML parser. So it's got a bunch of pre-built functions to read HTML. Okay, so then after that, guys, is everything underneath that we haven't done yet. Here are two basic methods we're going to use to extract the lyric information from this web page. Okay? pretty simple here. Oh, that's not really a good pointer. Let's point it here. So this first one, what this does, the .findAll function goes and looks for every single tag every single paragraph tag, and will provide every, P here, everything in between this as an element, or even like a tuple. It might be a tuple. It's probably, I think it's a list of lists, but regardless, as a tuple in a list. So if you have multiple P's, they're going to be, you'll have each of them, okay? Finds every one of the P tags and puts them into a list, okay? The next function we have here that's commented out is a little bit more complicated. So it's not only just finding all of the paragraph tags, but it's looking for only paragraph tags that are identified as verse in the class parameter. Okay, so what you see here is we're using the .findAll. It's still a string for P, but we then add a comma and pass into it a dictionary that has the HTML tag identifier we're looking for and the name that we want it to be. Okay, as a dictionary. And that's how we extract some information from this website. We'll show you how that all looks in a second. And then I wanted to organize this information into something that was usable in a dictionary. So I then did a bunch of processing on it. So we have this list of P's of paragraphs that are all waiting to be processed. We don't have them individually sorted out yet or stringed, and they still have tags in them. They'll still have the break tags in them, and we want to get rid of all of that. So what we've done now is that this lyrics object has a bunch of stanzas in it. When we look at it, you'll see what I mean. Each paragraph is a stanza, and we go through each of those stanzas and do some. We add them to a dictionary. We use this. We create a dictionary label. It's really just like the stanza number. So we get the index of the list, and we add +1 because remember we count from 0 when we use list index positions. So we're really just saying stanza 1, stanza 2, stanza 3. Another way we could do this is maybe extracting the ID information that we got from that we saw in the HTML source code. But in the end, we save this object in our dictionary, and what we're saving to the object is the stanza with all of the tags removed, just the raw string of it. Okay. Eventually we'll print that, you'll see what it looks like, and then this line saves our JSON dictionary, or our Python dictionary, into a file that we call JSON dictionary. And so basically how this all works is you have your dictionary that you want to save. We use json.dump, that's the command for it, and then we tell it which file path to go to. And because we're creating this file on the fly, we use the command that creates a file. So we use the open function, we give it the file name, and then we tell it if we're reading the file into memory or we're writing a file. So we say W for writing into a file. If we wanted to open this file, like if this is already stored and we wanted to put it into a variable, we would have to use the .r. We have to use the R notation. And if we wanted to add to a file that already exists, we use the A notation. That's just a quick demo of that. Okay guys, let's move into our code now and see how this is all working. And we're going to hop into a Jupyter Notebook like we have in the past, and we're just going to play with each of these lines one at a time. So first off, we have installed our Python packages, or we've loaded them into memory, so we have all these functions ready to go. Next, we have our URL, which is the list. We then iterate over all of the URLs in our list. We got to this point in our last class, so why don't we do this? I'm going to introduce the break function, or the break statement, so that way we don't have to comment everything out. And what is the break statement going to do? It's going to break out of this for loop. And then it'll run into this here, which might actually be bad, right? What happens if lyrics dictionary doesn't exist? It's going to error. Oops. There we go. So we're going to break there, and then we're just going to comment this out here because it's going to write an empty dictionary at this point. So let's just see what's going on with this section here, and we can play with this all a little bit. So we're going to print lyrics and see what we got here. Okay, so remember, we go to the website, we see if it was a successful return where we were able to extract some information. We then use the .text function to convert our HTML response into a string, and then convert the string object into a beautiful soup object with an HTML parser, so that we can then do our like .findAll functions and stuff that wouldn't exist if it was a string alone. What do we see when we get this findAll? It shows us a list, and it's we have a list with 4 objects in it. There's one there, there's one here, and so on and so forth, right? So there is definitely a list that exists there. Let's check the length of this list. It's 4. And then we also see this empty lyrics dictionary too. Okay, I'm gonna just also quickly print the beautiful soup object so you can see what we were looking at from before. We have our header. We can extract the header if we want. The name. This is the name of this specific song. It also happens to be the title bar, so we could extract the name of the song through either of these tags. We could then, and then you see though we have 4 P classes. Okay. And so that makes sense that we have 4 elements in that lyrics list when we've asked it to find all P elements. Okay. Does that make sense? So now I'm going to print the other one for you. We're going to extract the other one rather, and you're going to see what this does instead. So in this case, not only were we looking for all P tags, but we wanted P tags that specifically had the class label verse. And what do you expect to find when we do this? We get 2 objects. 1, 2, verse. Okay, so you could do the same thing with ID if you wanted. ID, and we know from this HTML page we were looking for the ID first or something. You could put in ID first, and it would give you just one paragraph object. Okay, that's how the findAll function works, and it's one of the first functions you should learn when you're trying to extract information from a website. So let's remove this break, and now look at the response for this one here, and see what the for loop ends up doing. We're gonna, after this for loop is complete, you notice that there's no more code to run, which means that because we're still indented, the next thing we would expect to happen is the next link, the next element, and the next link in the URL should run. But because we only have one URL, this for loop is now going to complete, and we're back to being unindented entirely. And we're going to print the dictionary after this whole process is done, and we'll see what it looks like. Okay, so what happens is I'm also going to print what this key looks like. So what we're doing with this, we're creating a key kind of on the fly. We can call this S key, stanza key, equal that, and we can look at what's going on here one step at a time. What's going on is we are creating a number. We wanted to create like a stanza number, so we asked the lyrics list to get the index value for whatever our current element is. So if it's our first stanza, it would get the index 0 because that's what it would match to completely, and it would return a 0. Because we want this to be like, there's no such thing as this stanza 0, so we want stanza 1, 2, 3, 4. We then add 1 to that integer and then convert the entire type into a string. So you get 1, 2, 3, 4 all as a string, because remember we want to keep our keys in dictionaries as strings for the most part. It's a lot easier to deal with. You can have them as integers, but usually don't recommend it. And then this next line here creates stanza.text. So with that, guys, we then print this lyrics dictionary, and you see that we have all of our stanzas there. Next thing we're going to lastly do is we are going to save the output of this dictionary into a file. And we looked at how that is all done. You're not going to be able to see how it works, guys, but if you go into your folder after the fact, you'll definitely see that this dictionary is there. I'm going to run that, and there's no response, so it definitely did work, okay? All right, let's do a recap. So what did we learn today, guys? We learned how to search for tags in Beautiful Soup using the findAll function. We learned how to access that embedded HTML and convert it into a string type, and then store that information using a simple for loop to organize and process that information into something that we can use later on for some sort of like natural language processing or something to that effect. Thank you very much, guys, and see you next time.